That's caught. Randall Cobb into Chicago territory. Randall Cobb inside the 20-yard line. Randall Cobb is going to score.
Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Open Book. This week is a special show as we welcome Matt Schneidman from The Athletic, who covers the Packers. Anyone watching this show knows exactly who Matt Schneidman is. He does a terrific job covering the Packers. So me and Zach are so appreciative for you to take the time and come on. And before we really get to Packer stuff and football stuff, I feel like the Packer fans would love to know a little bit more about you covering the team so closely. And maybe if you could just give them, kind of a quick background on your past and how you got to Green Bay and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm 25. I grew up in Connecticut. I was born in New York City, lived in Connecticut, southwestern Connecticut, most of my life in a town called Wilton, which is about 45 minutes outside New York City. I grew up diehard fan of the New York Yankees, New York Giants, Syracuse basketball because my dad went there. Then I ended up going to Syracuse, wrote for the student paper there, the Daily Orange, for 4 years, covered everything from women's ice hockey to softball to cross country, and then slowly worked my way up to men's soccer, men's lacrosse. What else? Pretty much everything. And then finally football and men's basketball. Did a bunch of internships along the way. And then shortly after college, after I interned at the Buffalo News for a couple months, I got a gig covering the Oakland Raiders for a newspaper called the Mercury News out in the Bay Area in California. So I lived out in Oakland and San Francisco for a year each after I graduated in 2017. And now I'm here. Been here for a little over a year, covering the Packers for The Athletic, loving every minute of it. People ask me if I'm used to the winters yet. I had winters like this in Syracuse for 4 years, so it's really nothing new. But, I always say you want to cover a relevant football team, and that can be bad or good. You either want to cover a team that's always in the news for bad reasons or always in the news for good reasons. And the Raiders were one end of that spectrum, and the Packers are obviously the other. So just glad to be along for the ride and another interesting season we got going here.
Yeah, for sure. And that's just pretty cool to hear all the different stops you've made. I would imagine that Green Bay is pretty unique compared to some of your other stops.
No doubt. Yeah, I compare it to Syracuse in that it feels like a college town, and that the only reason people, I don't mean this as any disrespect. And of course, anytime you preface something with that, you're probably going to say something disrespectful. But it feels like a college town in that the main reason, I'll say, not the only reason, that people live here is for the Packers. And, I love that because it makes me feel that what I do covering the team is way more important. Like when I am in an Uber back from the airport after a road trip, I got the Uber driver asking me about the team. And, I live in downtown Green Bay, and you see people checking out. I'm looking at it right now out my window. There's like not a monument, but like an exhibit with statues of old Packers players here that people are always checking out. In California, it wasn't like that because you have the Golden State Warriors, the 49ers, the San Francisco Giants that are all more popular out in the Bay Area. Here, it's just the Packers. And I say a college town because in Syracuse, New York, all people care about is Syracuse basketball. Yeah. Here, all people care about is the Green Bay Packers. So, it makes me feel like what I do is important, and I've enjoyed living in Green Bay because of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I think, and it's cool. It's like Eli said too, it's great to see like all like the different stops you made, like your journey, and for a lot of young writers, that I've talked to, and even myself, people that are like trying to like get into this industry and stuff, that's really kind of like encouraging, to hear and to see. A lot of people, I think, they don't know you're only 25.
Yeah.
And that was surprising to me too. Like to know that you're the same age as me. I didn't realize that, and that's just really awesome. You've come so far to get to this point, and it's just, like I said, it's really encouraging.
I will say I've been very fortunate because, I don't like to brag and boast about, I'm sure you guys see it on Twitter all the time and all over the place, wherever you go, that people from Syracuse, you'll know they're from Syracuse because they'll tell you they're from Syracuse. And I'm proud of the lineage that student paper, the Daily Orange, has produced. Greg Bishop, who writes the Super Bowl game story for the cover of SI every year, Pete Thamel, who's the best college sports writer in the country, Eli Saslow, who's won multiple Pulitzers for the Washington Post, Jesse Doherty, who just wrote a book. He's the main Nationals beat writer for the Washington Post, wrote a book after they won the title. And I'm leaving out so many people. Michael Cohen, who covered the Packers this job before me. He's the Daily Orange guy as well. Tyler Dunn, who did the same before me, and Michael Cohen. I mean, there are so many great people who came before me out of Syracuse that have helped me get to where I am today. I mean, I remember a couple of years back when I was a senior at Syracuse, Mike Hopkins, who was a longtime assistant for Syracuse basketball, was supposed to be their next head coach, was an assistant at Syracuse for 22 years, bolted for the head coaching job at University of Washington, and nobody really knew why. So I flew out to Washington to do a story on that. And Greg Bishop, who I just mentioned, who lives in Seattle, let me stay in his house while I was out there, so we didn't have to pay for a hotel as a student paper. So just small things like that. I'm so thankful and so fortunate to have people like that who have come through Syracuse before me, help me get to where I am today. And, it makes where I am now and how fortunate I am to be watching Aaron Rodgers and those guys practice every day. It makes the times when, I was taking buses from my apartment as a freshman at Syracuse to a downtown ice hockey arena to cover Syracuse women's ice hockey. I don't want to call that a struggle, but it makes those times feel like they were worth it.
Yeah, no. And you can tell, how far you've come kind of in your work, because you do great work. It's just Packer fans should be really grateful. They have guys like that. You. They have Rob
really appreciate that.
Wes Hot, they got all those guys, and you're top of the class. So Packer fans should be grateful, appreciative, and Eli and I are definitely appreciative for you to make time and come on the show right now and talk.
My pleasure. I mean, I really appreciate that because, I know the Twitter people can be ruthless sometimes. And, 2 weeks ago in Tampa, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't see any of it. Just like athletes, I see every single tweet that comes at me. I don't think I'm sensitive, but sometimes it's like, damn, there's another human out there who thinks I suck at my job. And, I like to think, like I said, it doesn't affect me too much, but, you guys are great on Twitter. I see all the stuff that both of you guys do, and what you guys are doing with Game On is awesome. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm a real journalist and I'm the only one you should follow. There's different things for every Packer fan out there. And some Packer fans may not just like the hard news that guys like me and Rob Domofsky and Jason Wilde and Bill Huber and all those guys put out. What you guys do is fantastic for another section of the fan base. And I'm just appreciative that people read what I write. They devote money to read what I write, and I couldn't be more thankful for that.
That's the nicest things anyone has ever said to me.
but Matt, you're right. I mean, I have a subscription to The Athletic purely to read your work. Also, I mean, Ben Fennell does great work for the Packers as well, but I make sure to read all of your articles. And like you mentioned, sorry, I think I just lost my train of thought there. I just completely lost my train of thought. But
I was saying, what was I saying? I was saying it might have been about how in the Packers Twitter sphere, whether it's you guys,
there it is.
Aaron Nagler, it's like everyone's doing their own thing.
Yeah, so I think without saying exactly what you were saying, but I would imagine you're talking about the tweet that talked about Aaron Rodgers potentially finishing his career with one ring, and I saw a lot of.
Oh, well, that was only one of them, yeah.
Yeah. But look, I'll say it right here with you. I agree with you. I think Aaron Rodgers is far too talented of a quarterback to play for a team for 15 years and walk away with one ring. That is, like you said, an indictment on the organization. Bottom line is you have an all-time quarterback at your disposal. They've had good receivers throughout the past. The defense has always been up and down. But if Aaron Rodgers ends his Green Bay Packer career with one ring, like you said, I think the main part of that blame has to be on the organization, the front office, and their lack of a willingness to surround him with talent. So, I mean, I guess that's what you believe by tweeting that. But Zach, are you on the same page?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you look at how hard it is to win a Super Bowl. go through a 16-game season, get through the playoffs, win the big one. Look how rare it is across the league for not just a team for the NFC to do that, just how rare it is. I mean, the Patriots, I think, distorted everybody's perception of how hard it is. You see Tom Brady win 6 rings, in that certain amount of span within 2 decades and get there, 9 times?
Right.
Everybody just kind of forgot how difficult it was, And yeah, sure, obviously you have Aaron Rodgers, probably the most talented quarterback ever, and you have Brett Favre win those 3 consecutive MVPs in the mid-90s. Maybe they should have won more, but I mean, you gotta have context in these situations. You gotta consider all the variables. They lost Sterling Sharp at the end of the '94 season. They were throwing in Antonio Freeman and Robert Brooks, guys who Antonio Freeman, he was in his 3rd season at the time. They had, a really good defense, but some of these things need to be considered. They didn't have this just game-changing offense that could have won multiple Super Bowls. They had.
Yeah, but they had at times. I mean, look, when you have a receiving core of Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Greg Jennings at times, and Eddie Lacy when he was young and good, and I know Rodgers got hurt that year, Lacy's rookie year, but offensively, I've always felt like they had the talent because the receivers were good.
For sure.
The running game was good enough with Rodgers. It just always came down to the defense, and that's where they failed. But, I mean, we're hopefully starting to see a bit of a changing in that after last week's game, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, and like I told you on last week's show, the last time their defense was probably average was 2015, and the offense was subpar that year. They rolled out Jeff Janis and Jared Aberdarius in a playoff game. That's not going to get you to an NFC Championship. It almost did.
Yeah, almost did.
But,
Aaron Rodgers magic almost did. Yeah.
Yeah, it took a couple Hail Marys.
Yeah, I think in the basis for that tweet, listen, I understand it can come across as arrogant or wrong because I've only been here for a little over a year, but I didn't say that to say, oh, look, the Patriots did it, everyone should be able to. I would say the same thing for the New Orleans Saints and the Seattle Seahawks. And it's strictly based on, listen, we can get into the semantics of, why they didn't get into the playoffs each year. Sure, Aaron Rodgers had nothing to do with the onside kick going through Brandon Bostic's hands in 2014, or I guess 2015, but I understand that. And I understand you can, pick and choose from each case where they didn't get to the Super Bowl and say, well, it could have been Rodgers' fault. And listen, Rodgers hasn't played great in big games throughout his career, all of them.
Yeah.
But I think just the general basis of that is quarterback is the most important position in sports. And if you have a guy like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, that's the biggest strength you have going for you to win more than one Super Bowl. And, Rodgers said it leading up to the NFC Championship game last year. He knows that the difference between 1 ring and 2 rings is monumental in talking about legacy. And he thoroughly understands that. And his number one goal for the remainder of his career is to get that 2nd ring. So listen, I may not be completely right in saying that it's an organizational failure, but I think it's reasonable to say that, if Rodgers only finishes his career with 1 ring, it would be a disappointment.
I think when you trot out Dimitri Goodson and Ladarius Gunter to line up against Julio Jones, I think you're probably you're pretty much right in saying, that falls on the organization. Because what do you expect Mike McCarthy and Dom Gabers to do?
Right.
I mean, that defense versus the Falcons, I mean, it was an embarrassment. You're talking about an undrafted free agent covering one of the greatest talented receivers ever in the NFC Championship game. And I mean, it was just pathetic. That game was just pathetic.
There really is no excuse for that. I mean, I'm all about, coaches should be able to coach what they have, but at some point there's got to be a freaking line drawn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if this is a good segue, I guess, if we're talking about, personnel and adding players to teams. Matt, obviously right now is, probably the busiest week of NFL trade talk, we're going to be getting. So I don't think there's anyone more intact with the organization right now than you. So how How optimistic do you see? I mean, as Packer fans our whole lives, me and Zach, we both know that we've had this hope and it never happens. But Matt, you're in the building, you're seeing what's going on, maybe you're hearing some conversations. Should Packer fans actually have a belief that they might make a move this year?
Listen, I completely understand. Growing up a New York Giants fan, and I wasn't really in touch with the Packers fan base growing up, but just being here for a little over a year, I can sense both last year and this year, there's that existential dread that, they always talk about a move, but they never make that move at the trade deadline. Sure, they have in free agency, as we saw with like the Smiths and all those guys. But I can say, and this is from our Aaron Reese, who covers the Texans, as he tweeted out today, the Packers have inquired more so than any other team for Will Fuller. And that interest is serious. It's not just a, hey, what could we get for him? It's actual legit interest. Wow. And I think if anything, obviously a deal's not imminent. They are a little bit off in terms of what they're asking for and what the Texans want, or what the Packers are willing to give up and what the Texans are asking for. But if anything, it shows that the Packers have genuine interest to go for it and give Aaron Rodgers another weapon. Because last year, we didn't find out till after the season that Gutekunst was trying to add an offensive weapon at the trade deadline. We didn't really hear any names at the time, and he only mentioned it in passing after they lost to the 49ers. And then obviously the draft happens. Everyone knows what happened there. And then this year, they lose Funchess, they lose Lazard. MVS is looking like he's fallen off a cliff again. Adams goes down for a couple games, and there's this feeling that they're not going to add another receiver because they just haven't done that the past couple of years. But I think more so than any other time during the brief Matt LaFleur era, I think this would be the most likely that they do. And don't forget, I know that these past connections don't always mean something, but in 2014, Will Fuller was a sophomore at Notre Dame when he caught 15 touchdown passes. Matt LaFleur was on that offensive staff. He was the quarterback's coach there. And before they played the Texans, LaFleur had just effusive praise for Will Fuller. And listen, what he can add to this offense can't be understated. He can take the top off the defense, just like Valdez-Scantling, but unlike Valdez-Scantling, he can catch a football. And I think he could be a nice compliment to Devontae. And Alan Lazard started practicing again today, so he'll be back soon. I don't know if it'll be this week, but especially with a short week coming up against the 49ers. But if you have Devontae, Will Fuller, and Alan Lazard as your top three, you suddenly go from a team where everyone's clamoring for a wide receiver to a team that looks pretty set at wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if they could get Fuller, I mean, when I first saw the rumor, I was like, okay, another Packers, they're interested, this, that. But knowing Goody's comments before the draft that they really were targeting receivers, and I think we can all agree the way the draft fell in for sure the first 3 rounds couldn't be much worse for the Packers in terms of drafting a receiver. Mm-hmm. The board just fell awfully. So now would be his chance. And like at first I was on the phone with like my brother talking about it, and I'm like, okay, this isn't going to happen. But then, I just started thinking over the next few minutes, like Goody has given us reason to believe he's going to take that shot. He did it with the Smiths and Amos and Billy Turner, and it would just make sense. Well, Houston is dying to trade one of those receivers. We need one. You have the LaFleur-Fuller connection, and I usually don't like to get my hopes up, but they're pretty up. They're pretty up right now.
Yeah, and like Matt mentioned, it would make just this whole unit that much more well-rounded, and it would also give them way more incentive to get Devontae in the slot. And when you do that, and you have Alan Lazard on the perimeter, you get Will Fuller on the perimeter, that just makes your unit that much more lethal as a whole. And I think the perception right now is that, they didn't draft a guy in April. They just brought in Seth Roberts. They're not going to do anything. With those two things considered, they're probably content with what their group looks like right now. But things have changed drastically since April. Devin Funchess opted out. Equanimeous St. Brown had the injury, and it's probably going to take some time for him to get acclimated again, even though he just came back. Last week and this week was his first couple games back, and he's been essentially a non-factor. And like Matt mentioned as well, MVS has taken a step back, as far as where he started the season from. He's went from this over-the-top deep threat to the guy that we saw the last couple of months of the season last year, where he just fizzled out after 4 of the first 7 games last year. He had receptions of 40-plus yards in those games.
And I'll say this, I just want to add a quick stat, then I'll let you keep going. So last year, at the end, it was interesting because at the end of last season, like, he wasn't even on the field. So I think he had 5 catches for 36 yards in the final 11 games, playoffs included. This year, he's getting on the field, but there is only, I know I tweeted this a couple of days ago, so I apologize for being repetitive, but there is one wide receiver in the National Football League who has a drop rate of over 20% that has played in every game and has received at least 2 catchable balls per game. And I add those qualifiers. It may seem like I'm saying, oh, you're just, narrowing the criteria to make it fit MVS, but that shows, if receivers play only 2 games, there's not that big of a sample size. If they only have 1 catchable ball thrown their way, not that big of a sample size. So the one receiver who's that bad at catching catchable passes with that big of a sample size is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I believe he has 19 catchable balls and 4 drops this year, according to PFF. And listen, you saw it again on Houston. Against Minnesota in week 1, you could kind of forgive him because he had a couple big plays too. But against Houston, I believe he was targeted 4 times, no catches. He's just a non-factor. I mean, there will always be a place on an NFL field for someone who can run that fast. But if you can't catch the passes, what good is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, and most notably, he had that drop on the left sideline.
Yeah.
That went right through his hands. It was catchable. Yeah, it's definitely concerning, when you rely on him, and especially when, I don't want to say they're force-feeding Davante Adams, but when he has 16 targets and every other receiver on the roster combines for 2 catches and 6 yards, and that only receiver is Malik Taylor. That's literally his stat line: 2 catches, 6 yards, and a touchdown. That's all for Malik Taylor, and every other receiver did nothing. Granted, you're getting contributions from your tight ends and your running backs and everything, but I don't know if that's sustainable down the stretch and against really good defenses, that aren't the Texans. So I think if anything, it's more glaring at this point right now that the Packers need to reach out to other resources, bring in someone other than Seth Roberts. We don't even know if he's the answer yet. Yeah. He still has to obviously clear COVID protocols, and he's just joining the practice squad. He still has to show out, show what he can do and everything before he gets promoted. But yeah, if anything is more obvious at this point, it's that they need to add from the outside.
Yeah. I covered Seth Roberts for 2 years in Oakland. He was on the team then. In the first, it was funny. There was a stat that we love to use there. In the first 10 games of his career that Seth caught a touchdown pass, the Raiders were 10-0. He always had a knack for coming up big in clutch moments, and he's kind of fallen off with the Ravens and the Panthers now. But I know he's going to start on the practice squad, but he's not this street free agent who's never done anything. He was Derek Carr's number 2 wide receiver there. During that, well, I guess it was Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree, but Seth Roberts was a reliable number 3 for Derek Carr during that near MVP season in 2016. So he's no slouch. I know he hasn't had the recent success, but he's a guy who's done it in the league before. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see him on the game day 55 this weekend. I mean, or the next week after that, because obviously there is some time he has to clear protocols and all that.
Yeah, considering the rest of the receiving depth, he obviously has the most experience in the NFL. And while the trust with Rodgers is a huge thing, and even if some of the guys on the team may seem worse than Rodgers probably has more trust in them initially, but that could change over time. But I did want to jump into a couple fan questions. I think we have some good ones. And here's one from Todd Varney. So Matt, yeah, when you're interviewing opposing coaches, he wants to know who's your least favorite and who's your favorite. So, who's someone you do not want to have to interview post game and someone you're always looking forward to it?
Opposing coaches or players?
Opposing. It says opposing coaches, but if you have a specific player, that works too.
Okay. Well, we talk to opposing coaches pretty much every Wednesday on a conference call, and I wouldn't say I don't have I wouldn't say I have a least favorite because they're always pretty good. And what I've come to notice is opposing coaches are really good with the opposing team's beat writers because it's a fresh set of faces. It's a different set of questions. Opposing coaches love talking about the other team and just like showing off how much they know. I think I'm a little biased when saying this, but I love talking to John Gruden when the Packers played the Raiders last year. Obviously, I covered Gruden for a year, and he was fantastic in Oakland, but I'd say he would be my favorite. In terms of players, here, with the Raiders, there weren't too many go-to guys. I mean, Derek Carr is a great guy and a really nice person, but he'll be the first one to tell you he's really PC, and Aaron Rodgers is the opposite. I mean, he tells it how it is, and it's basically a teaching lesson every time he talks. So I love learning from Rodgers every time he talks and just getting his insights. I love talking to Jair Alexander. I have a story coming out next week on him. I talked to him on the phone for about 20 minutes the other day, and basically just I know maybe if other reporters are watching this, they'll try and steal it, but I don't really care. Basically how 5 years ago he's the number 1,000 recruit in the class of 2015 and how he's ascended to be this star cornerback. And so Jair's a really great interview when he's not in a crowd. Devontae is really insightful, really good. It's not often you get a team like this where their stars are the best interviews, and Rodgers and Adams are. Aaron Jones is a great guy. Kenny Clark, great guy.
I'm sure Jamal Williams must be fun.
I have a Jamal story, a big Jamal story coming out tomorrow morning. He's great. I didn't talk to him one-on-one for it, but he's great. Za'Darius, I sat down with him for a story for about 20 minutes last season. He was fantastic. But yeah, I mean, the Packers locker room, there aren't any guys who actively try to avoid us. Granted, they kind of have to talk this year if people ask them to because they're on Zoom. Jimmy Graham was the only one who actively tried to avoid us last year. and he got fined $25,000 because he didn't talk to us for the first, 7 weeks of the season. And when he did talk to us, he was good. He was fantastic. And so I wouldn't say there are any. Bakhtiari's another fantastic one. Brian Bulaga, Corey Linsley. I mean, there aren't any bad guys. There are some guys who don't give as great anecdotes or quotes, but I think that's just me being stingy as a reporter. I like talking to all these guys, really. I know that's cliche, but there are a lot of good interviews in this locker room.
I've never interviewed him personally, obviously, but I've noticed Mercedes Lewis is really, really good. Mm-hmm. Just from like the some of what I've watched on the website, just in his 3 years with the Packers, just he's really outspoken. He offers really good quotes, and he just goes so in depth with just the detail in his answers. Yeah, he's just and when he gives some of the answers that he does, it's easy to kind of see like why they view him as kind of like the leader he is in the locker room, and right. Why he's kind of like why he just has the role that he is.
Yeah, he's like the old soul, and yeah, he is 36, but. And it's different this year on Zoom because in a normal year we can, Rodgers talks every Wednesday, Adams talks every Wednesday, Jones would talk once a week, the Smiths would talk once a week last year. So like the main people have set days, but anyone else, you can really go up to them and talk to them whenever. And Mercedes obviously had a little bit of a bigger role last year, but I remember the first time he talked last year, he was really insightful about how he essentially almost quit. He after the 2018 season, he said, "There's no role for me on this team. They don't use me how I want to be used." And he was a free agent, and he was driving to and this was from Jason Wilde's story on The Athletic last year. He was driving to the airport to go to his off-season home, wherever that is. I don't remember where it is. And Goody called him and said, "Turn around, come back. We're going to make this work." And Mercedes said, if I didn't get that phone call, I would not be a Green Bay Packer right now. And basically, anytime a player lets you in like that and gives insight like that, it's fantastic. And, he is a guy who's been in the league for so long, so he knows how media works. He knows how to talk. But you like with Rodgers, you feel like you're learning something. You feel like you're talking to a football historian because he's been in the league for so long. And, it's just great wisdom whenever he talks. So, yeah, he's another good one.
I agree. Wow, that's like, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that part of the Mercedes Lewis story either, and I think that's really cool, and I'm happy that they've brought him on. I mean, just his leadership alone is very clearly a big part of this team, and Rodgers obviously loves him. But I did have another question in regards to Aaron Rodgers. You were talking earlier about, I think you said he's, more smiley, this, that, just kind of a different vibe from him. So you were there last year, you're here this year now. I mean, what do you think it is? Well, what do you think of Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, it's interesting because he's talked about this a bunch on the Pat McAfee show too, which I've really enjoyed watching him go on, because they kind of get him to show a different side than we do, and I totally understand that, and I love watching it. But from what he said, it seems that he just has a new appreciation for life, and I think we can all read into what he means when he says he made some decisions in his personal life this offseason. I don't want to assume any relationship stuff, but I'm guessing that's what he means. He's taken vacations to Peru, and he's really found his inner self. What I think it means, and this might just be reading too much into it, is the Jordan Love pick made him realize that the clock has started on him here. I'm sure he knew his career was never going to last forever here, but that was the first real tangible decision made that let him know that, I might be invincible too, and I might not be untouchable. Yeah. And whether that's after this season or after 2 more seasons, or after 3 more seasons, or even if Aaron Rodgers finishes his career here and Jordan Love never plays a snap for the Packers, which I would not be shocked by, Aaron Rodgers realizes that this year he needs to take stock of everything he's accomplished. And, he's reflected. He is more appreciative of, I don't want to say more appreciative, but he's been more vocally appreciative of the fans and the traditions and, the fans at away games. Maybe that's just because, all that stuff has been taken away because of COVID, but he's found his inner happiness, and that mixed with what I still do think is a chip on his shoulder, because they drafted Jordan Love, has created this concoction of danger for other teams. Because an Aaron Rodgers who's happy in his own skin but still feels like he has something to prove is a dangerous one.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. People can sit here and say the Love pick doesn't make a difference. Any human being, of course it does. Yeah, you're a human being. You have a job, and someone essentially brings someone in to take your job. Like, of course that matters. And as disappointed / confused as I was on draft night, if that pick is what fueled Rodgers to be playing the way he is right now, I'll take it. Like, I'll take that as a win. But yeah, right now Aaron Rodgers, like you said, I mean, he has that new chip on his shoulder. Like, for a while, it seemed like it faded because everyone knew he was just so good. And then the doubters came, the haters came, and now he's just shutting them all up week after week because he's Aaron Rodgers. He's not close to done, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah, I think there's 2 types of people. You're going to have the people who, when your replacement comes in and they're actively seeking, maybe this is the future, maybe this is the guy who's going to be your successor, they pack it in, they start giving an attitude, they start acting petty, they just start being a total dick. But with Aaron Rodgers, the competitive quarterback, the guy who started playing with a chip on his shoulder after a draft issue a decade and a half ago, and ever since, he's had that in the back of his mind. I think it's a little different for him. I think someone like that, he's going to take that pick and he's going to use it as motivation. People who are going to be like, oh, you know what? No, this doesn't matter. Aaron Rodgers doesn't care. It did nothing for him. You think he's going to be worried about some rookie coming out of college, some dude? No, he doesn't care. No, yeah, of course, like you said, of course he cares. Of course he's gonna see that. The guy who sat behind Brett Favre for 3 years before taking over in 2008, he saw how that happened. He saw how it could happen to Brett Favre. It could happen to him. So, yeah, he's going to use this as motivation, and he's going to make himself maybe try to make himself invaluable, make the Packers less prone to moving on from him. Give them a reason to keep him in town, to reconsider what they did. I don't think they will. I think, maybe Jordan Love is still presumably the future. He's still the heir at quarterback. But, if he plays the way that he is right now and he sustains the way that he's been playing, I think that could change some things. Obviously we don't know. It's still a year or two down the road. We don't know whatever's going to happen with his contract or, what the Packers are going to do. But yeah, it's going to change some things.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, listen, like I said, would I be stunned? I was about to say shocked. So stunned or shocked if Aaron Rodgers was not the quarterback of this team next season? No, I would not be surprised. I would also not be surprised if, like I said, Jordan Love never takes a snap for the Packers. Because in 2 years, if Aaron Rodgers is still playing at this level and Goody and the guys think, all right, he can do this for another 2 years. And there's also a quarterback we like more than Jordan Love in the draft coming out. Let's take him and have him sit behind for 2 years, and then Aaron's contract runs out and we can start him. And then at that time, after 2 years, another team comes calling and says, you know what, we'll give you a third-round pick for Jordan Love. And Goody says, you know what, cut my losses. I'll take the L on that one. We want Rodgers. I could see that happening too. But it's one of the most intriguing stories in the NFL to watch here in the near future, is because with Tom Brady, it was different. Granted, he's playing lights out now, but in New England, he wasn't the same Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers is still the same Aaron Rodgers. And he said this when we talked the first time we talked to him after the draft. He's trying to make it as hard as possible for the team to move on from him as he can. He still wants to finish his career here. Could he have some ill will toward Brian Gutekunst? Sure, but that's not going to affect his play. If anything, it's going to help it. And I bet that if Aaron Rodgers, if they do trade him after this season, if they do cut him after two more years, he's going to want to play for a team in this division to prove that they made the wrong decision, as he should. That's what he should do, just like Brett Favre did.
Yeah, look, I've always said that as much as I love Aaron Rodgers, but we all know him, he is someone who will have some spitefulness to him, and he's going to want to prove people wrong. And if the Packers, obviously, if they could trade him, of course, they'll trade him out of the probably entire NFC. But if Aaron Rodgers were to ever not be on the Packers and have the opportunity to come back to the NFC North, unfortunately, I agree with you. He would absolutely do it because Aaron Rodgers he's that personality. He wants to go and prove you wrong. But I like the point you brought up about Rodgers playing the way he is and Love. I mean, the way I've always looked at it is that no matter how good Aaron Rodgers plays, if they really think Jordan Love is the next Patrick Mahomes, they're not going to let him leave. But if Love is just progressing kind of averagely for a young QB, not really flashing, not doing anything too crazy, and Rodgers is playing like this, I'm totally with you even if it's this offseason, if let's say Aaron Rodgers, even if he doesn't win an MVP, but if he wins an MVP or the Packers actually make it to the Super Bowl, but Rodgers shows that for 16 games he's playing this well, I think they could turn around this offseason maybe and say, you know what, trade Jordan Love for a good solid second-round pick. I think a team would do that who's QB needy. And I think that could also be an option. It could be 2 years down the line. It could be next year. But if you have Aaron Rodgers playing like this, why would you force him out? That's my question. It doesn't make sense to me.
It's a good question. And here, a quick fun exercise. Let's say, hypothetically, 2 years from now, Rodgers is declining a little, body's banged up. Packers want to trade him for a first-round pick. When he's, he'll be 39?
38, 39, yeah.
Yeah, he's 36 now. So after the 2021 season, he'll be 38. So if the Packers trade him to an AFC team, pick one AFC team, if you had to, that you could see Rodgers playing for, starting for in 2022.
Patriots.
I have mine. I want to hear who you guys think.
Yeah, I'm with Eli. Patriots.
I would think it would be the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's not a bad option.
True. Ben's getting old.
Yeah, Ben. It's funny because Ben's barely older than Rodgers, but he's had so many more big hits, injuries, and his body's clearly not in the same shape as Rodgers. So yeah, Pittsburgh's a pretty good call there.
That's true. Yeah, he came into the year 1 year earlier, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, 1 year earlier, but
in Eli's class, yeah.
3 years, and Ben started, I think, year 1. So
yeah,
I mean, it's funny to look back at that draft class with Eli, Phillip Rivers, and Ben, and all 3 of them, I believe, are in the top 10 ever touchdown passes, all within a few touchdowns. I just think that's very cool how that worked out. But so as we mentioned last week on the show, this week on Game on Open Book, we wanted to start doing some game film and break down some of these Matt LaFleur play calls, which, Matt, I'm sure being around the team, you've noticed how good, I mean, this play calling outside of maybe Tampa has been as good or better than anyone else in the league. Real quick, Blue Moon is my usual go-to on the beer choice, but basically, so me and Zach had 2 plays we really wanted to highlight. One of them was that deep shot to Robert Tonyan, and the other one was the touchdown to Jay Sternberger. So I'm going to pull up here we'll start with the Jay Sternberger touchdowns. I really think that was very interesting, and just the way they set it up. So here I'm going to pull it up, and right now you're watching. So you get the motion, and then you get the play action, and then he comes across. There's going to be a slow motion after this, but you'll see. Watch as the middle linebackers and the safeties all are watching A.J. Dillon. All of them. And then Jay Sternberger just slips out. Rodgers, perfect little touch pass over J.J. Watt. Sternberger brings it in with one hand, touchdown. So, like, all that pre-snap motion we were seeing that they really weren't using, but still, it freezes a defense. That's the most important thing. It freezes those middle defenders just for half a second to the point where they can't react fast enough. So a play like that, you know, when you're watching, and either one of you can kick us off at this, but the way LaFleur has been setting up this offense with motions and play actions and how effective it's been, and just what are your thoughts around that?
Go ahead, Zach.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've seen that all year. Just some of those that pre-snap motion and just setting up some of those mismatches, exploiting those mismatches. Everything that happens before the snap, and some of those players, like in this situation, Jay Sternberger being able to leak out underneath, that's been just such a catalyst to their success this season. And on the TV copy, that throw really didn't look difficult, but when you see it from the all-22 angle,
it feels like a jump.
Yeah, to loft that over J.J. Watt of all people, that's ridiculously hard. You know, when you see it from that angle, you kind of realize that. But yeah, you see that's like a prime example of just the things that they've been doing all season, and really just a huge proponent of a huge component of Matt LaFleur's offense is just all of that pre-snap motion and multiple things happening at once, all of the bells and whistles kind of combining to create just a small little thing like that. Just leaping out into
the Malik Taylor touchdown also it was a quick play action, fake that block, turn around, and it was just perfect. It was a perfect play call as well.
And that throw needed to be perfect too. That needed to be out right in front.
Coverage, out to the hands. So I really liked what I saw to them at the goal line. And now let's take a look at maybe a bit of a deeper shot. And this is the one to Tonyan. You guys will see here. So you got the bubble screen set up. And look at this. I mean, the whole defense is staring at Jamal Williams. They think it's going to him. Tonyan just blows by the defender and makes the catch. So, I mean, just to go back and take another look, this is such a common play in the NFL, the bubble screens now. And the way LaFleur, I mean, Devontae was open, Sternberger every receiver was open because they were so convinced that was going to be a screen. So, Matt, I mean, you get to see practice basically on a daily basis and all that. How have you noticed Matt LaFleur's uses of the illusion of complexity, you know, where they come out with the same set and then they just fool you, and that play fooled them. Let's be real. If Rodgers put a better ball on that, Tonyan could have ended up in the end zone there. So as someone watching them probably closer than any of us will be, what have you noticed out of Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, and their clear connection they've had in year 2 has just been unstoppable?
Yeah, I will say they purposely don't let us watch that part of practice where they're doing all that stuff.
Of course.
So we can't talk about it on places like this. But the reason I got my phone was because Rodgers was asked about that play to Tanyan today, and whether he underthrew him, basically, because there were a couple underthrows. And what Rodgers said was, let's see, where is it? So he said the one to Robert, I think he was still widening as he passed his defender on the pump and go, and I threw it as if he would kind of straighten up. So I felt really good about the throw on that one. Obviously, based on the way he ran it, it ended up having to be a little bit of a difficult catch. But no, I don't see a whole lot of things that were way off in that game. So that's what Rodgers said. So I don't even think he viewed it as an underthrow or an errant throw. But I do think this illusion of complexity and the multiples that LaFleur can come out with in different looks. Like when he has two running backs in the backfield with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, or Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon, you can do so many things out of that. You can throw a screen pass one way. You can throw a screen pass the other way. You can have both of them blocking. You can have one of them blocking while one of them runs. I mean, and the thing is, you can't do that if you don't have players who have proven they can do the things you're trying to fake. Like, the special thing about this offense is Tyler Ervin was the motion guy. He goes out. Aaron Jones has to do it against the Buccaneers. And then Aaron Jones goes out, and A.J. Dillon and Jamal Williams have to do it. So, like, these opponents are still getting fooled by this misdirection and the motion and the play action with guys who have never done it before. And that's just a testament to they have to prepare themselves for LaFleur's principles, not necessarily players. And that's a credit to LaFleur because he's made his offense so unpredictable that even if it's A.J. Dillon, who's, never gotten a goal line carry in his life, teams still have to prepare as if he's going to, because they know how dangerous the Packers can be in the red zone. So, yeah, I think LaFleur's done a really good job calling plays and designing stuff. Like, so if you watch back on the mic'd up from the Seahawks game in the playoffs last year, LaFleur gives Devontae the exact play they're going to run on his second touchdown, the one where he catches it and goes all the way across the field. And after the play, Rodgers kind of goes over to LaFleur and says, "Great call, kid." And the one where, Devontae was wide open a lot on Sunday, but the one where he crosses over the entire field, it kind of reminded me of that because obviously when I'm watching on TV, as I was this past Sunday, or if I'm at the game, you don't see everything. But if you look back and you just watch the middle of the field every time Devontae's running a route or any motion is going on in the backfield, there's just confusion among the other teams. And if you got a safety to step one step too far forward, 1 second too soon, that can blow up a whole play for you. And I think that's what Matt LaFleur is so good at, is making defenses do that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that play in particular that Eli just showed, it helps when you have a really good pass catching running back like Jamal Williams. Like, even on like the fourth offensive play in the game, when he caught that 17-yard reception, clash with Destin Reed, bounced back up, started headbanging like a psycho. That lone pump fake, that's enough to freeze the corner in the flat and obviously free Tanyan down the sideline. And also, like Matt said, and as Rodgers said today, he expected him to kind of straighten out. His route was a little wide. I lost my train of thought. Thanks, Eli. You kind of when people were watching that live on Sunday, they thought he did underthrow it because they thought he kind of reverted back to some of the same mechanics that he was showing the last couple of years, where he started off his back foot, kind of lackadaisical, just really kind of just lollipopping some of his throws in, But maybe that was just kind of like a little, I don't want to say miscommunication, but that should have been maybe like a little better of a route. But you see just that lone pump fake to a running back that teams view as a pass catching threat, as a guy who can run routes out of the backfield and even line up wide as a receiver. And that's, as Matt talked about, that's just a big testament to what Matt LaFleur's offense is and what he's able to do schematically to get some of these players in positions to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're running a little bit on time, so I have a couple last questions. We didn't get to cover a lot of like the news around the Packers right now, and I think the biggest news is Aaron Jones not practicing again. And it felt around Packers Nation last week that it was precautionary. It really wasn't a big deal. Now all of a sudden it's Wednesday and he's not practicing. I mean, from your perspective, what are your percentages that we see Aaron Jones on Sunday? 0, right? I mean,
I'm no voice expert, but listening to Matt LaFleur talk about Aaron Jones today, he did not sound optimistic. He used the words, "We're going to be very careful with him. We want him back sooner rather than later." And, he seemed more optimistic about Alan Lazard and Christian Kirksey than he did about Aaron Jones. And listen, it's easier to make a decision like that when you have a guy like Jamal Williams, but I wholeheartedly expect that Aaron Jones does not play, especially with the short week coming up, the Thursday night game at the 49ers. But yeah, I agree with you in that it seemed super precautionary last week, and this would just be a 1-week thing. But as we saw with Kevin King, he was questionable and very much a game time decision against the Buccaneers. Then he practices and he's doubtful against the Texans. So these things don't always go in a linear path as you'd expect. The luxury for the Packers is that they've proven capable of having the depth that can compensate for these guys. I mean, as much as everyone gets on Josh Jackson and as iffy of a game he had against the Buccaneers, I thought he played pretty well against the Texans. And yeah, I think you can get by the Vikings with some of your reserves in there. And I think the main goal is to listen. Coaches and players will never say they're strategically planning DNPs to set up for future opponents. But LaFleur sees the Vikings on the schedule. The Vikings, us three might be playing cornerback for them on Sunday. They have no healthy corners. So if they can get by the Vikings and then have their healthy bodies for the 49ers, I think that's the goal, realistically. I mean, you look at the list of guys who were practicing today. I know Jones, Kevin King, and Mason Crosby wasn't, which might be the biggest problem out of all of them.
Was that a veteran rest day or is there an injury?
He has a left calf injury and a back injury, which sounds like just an old man hurting. But I don't know if I'm supposed to report this. I think I can. But, I got a glimpse that J.K. Scott was practicing field goals inside the Hudson Center today. So it seems like something that could actually happen. And it's not like I know they've worked out a bunch of kickers, but you can't get a kicker in time to play on Sunday.
Yeah. That was another question I wanted to ask real quick. If in a scenario, breaking news, Packers trade for Will Fuller or et cetera, would they even be able to play this week?
No.
Right? That's what I thought.
They have to isolate for 6 days, pass COVID testing. So the soonest, and I don't even if they make a deal on Monday, you'll be able to play against the 49ers because
so you got to get it done this week if you want them for the Niner game.
Exactly. So but as I was saying, the good news is David Bakhtiari. It was a walkthrough today, very light. They're going to be very light in practice this week. David Bakhtiari, Alan Lazard, Christian Kirksey, Tyler Ervin, Darnell Savage. We're all practicing today, as were Raven Green and Chris Barnes, who both left Sunday's game and didn't return. So some good injury news, some bad injury news. But listen, if you would have told me before the season that Billy Turner and Will Redmond and Josh Jackson and Jamal Williams would all look really good in a 15-point win against the Houston Texans, I would have said you're crazy. But they have the depth that has proven capable of filling in when their big guys go down.
Yeah, I think that's definitely Josh Jackson's play, especially the last couple of weeks, has been kind of flying under the radar. I mean, he gave up a touchdown last week, I believe, to Tyler Johnson, but he made a couple nice third down stops. He really shined out again against the Texans on the perimeter. He made, I believe it was another nice tackle in the backfield against the Texans. I mean, he's had a really nice couple of games when they've needed to rely on him without Kevin King. So if they have to do it for another week, I mean, he's given them more than enough confidence to do so. I mean, he's proven reliable the last couple of weeks as a tackler. Maybe not so much in other aspects of being of playing the cornerback position, but baby steps.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited, honestly, about Josh Jackson. I think maybe, cornerback's a hard position. It could take a couple years to get into that groove, but the talent you saw when he was in college, I believe, was totally legit. So I still have hopes for Jackson. But before we close out the show, we do have a game on Sunday against a NFC North rival in the Minnesota Vikings. They may be 1-5. They may look awful talent-wise and just in general, but it's never an easy game against the Vikings. So let's do just a quick run around of how you think the game goes, and then maybe a quick score prediction. So Matt, why don't you just kick us off?
Yeah, I think the Vikings have the pieces on offense to make it a game. I mean, Dalvin Cook's a top 3 running back in the league. Adam Thielen is one of the most underrated receivers in the league. But the Vikings defense is in absolute shambles. I mean, they just traded Yannick Ngakoue. Like I said, their cornerbacks are battered. Cameron Dantzler, who is a high draft pick, who starts for them, it just went on the COVID list today. So who knows if he plays this weekend. Hill and Hughes just got manhandled last time these guys played. So it's one thing to have a good pass rush and not a great secondary, or a bad pass rush and a good secondary, because those two things kind of go hand in hand. But the Vikings are pretty terrible in both regards. So as we've seen this season, and I believe it's PFF who says Aaron Rodgers has by far the best passer rating in the league when given a clean pocket, and add in that Devontae Adams is still Devontae Adams. I think I wouldn't call it a shootout, but I would expect a similar score to the Texans games, where the Vikings are able to put up some points, but the Packers are just too powerful. So I'll go 37-24 Packers.
I like it. I'll take that. Zach, how about you?
Yeah, I don't think the Packers, outside of Jair Alexander, of course, but that season opener was actually, statistically his worst performance of the season. And ever since then, it's been an uphill ascension. He hasn't been talked about, which is obviously good if you're a cornerback. I agree. I think it's going to be a little bit close to a shootout. I don't think the Vikings are going to really just light up the scoreboard or anything like that, but the Packers, outside of this recent game against the Texans, they haven't been able to consistently generate much pass rush, which is just a night and day difference from what they were able to do last year. And if you give Kirk Cousins just a clean pocket to work from, historically, the last few years, he has shredded the Packers defense. I don't think he's going to necessarily do that with as much ease this week, but I think the Vikings are still able to put up a decent amount of points, especially if Dalvin Cook is able to play, which I think they were expecting him to be able to do coming out of the bye week.
Yeah.
They still got Justin Jefferson. They got Adam Thielen, and defensively, they're definitely they're hurting. They've returned 7 of 11 starters, I think, this season. It's just a complete unrecognizable unit. I got the Packers winning 38-26, as I just predicted on another show, which is probably going to be very wrong because I'm an idiot. But that's my prediction. I think the Packers, like you said, they don't have an answer for Devontae Adams. The Vikings don't have an answer for him. And Aaron Rodgers, he's just playing in rhythm with the offense this season, as he did against the Texans. He's throwing in rhythm. He's taking everything that's available to him, and I haven't seen him this comfortable in the offense in a very long time.
True,
that's not true. I didn't. Well, okay, I did say that. That was different, though. Look, in my defense, I also said that it's very early. It was Sunday night, and I need a little more time to really, really evaluate. So that was a rough draft. All right, it was a rough draft.
Well, yeah, I mean the Vikings offense, they have some playmakers. Obviously, the most important thing is putting consistent pressure on Cousins, and then he just becomes a below-average quarterback at best. So I do think that after that Bucs game, Mike Pettin might actually have realized that you have the talent that you can blitz and you can bring pressure, and you have the talent at the back end to cover. So I'm really hoping to see pressure on Cousins consistently, and I'm expecting to see that. I think with Kenny Clark getting a second week back, it's going to help Darius, it's going to help Preston and Gary. And I agree with both of you. I mean, they're not going to they're not going to keep the Vikings to 10 points, but I think we could see a 34-17 kind of win for the Packers and just really dominate, because they're at home. They're coming off a big win on the road against an offense that's way better, and they gave up 20 points. So I'm pretty confident in the Packers pulling out a W this week. But just before we head out, both Matt and Zach, any final thoughts, Matt, where everyone can find all your work, and just any final thoughts on the Packers you might want to share with listeners?
Yeah, I mean, on The Athletic, that's where I'll be, on Twitter, obviously. And my parting shot is I think Mike Pettin deserves way more credit than he's gotten this year. Did I say that right? Way more credit than he's gotten, because the Falcons and Texans are two offenses with a lot of firepower, and his defense has held them to 16 points and 20 points. And granted, I think the biggest indictment of Mike Pettin this year was those 2 12-men on the field penalties within 5 plays against the Buccaneers, because that's coaching. You know, if you have Will Redmond or Raven Green kind of easing into things, that's not always coaching. I think Mike Pettin has done a far better job than people give him credit for. Like, it's not his fault that Preston Smith has seemed disinterested for the majority of the season. I mean, what, Mike Smith can't motivate those guys? If there's anyone who can, it's Mike Smith. So my parting shot is easy. Easy does it on the Fire Pettin talk. Easy does it on the Dan Quinn for DC talk. I think Pettin's doing a nice job, and I'm not saying that just because he's one of my favorite interviews on the entire team.
Well, Matt, clearly you've made us look good. I'm not sure how, but I'm with you. I think that, I mean, Pettin, it's frustrating to watch, you know, that play against the Bucs when it's 3rd and 2 and you're 12 yards off the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
But most importantly, I think this goes for any coach at any position, your willingness to adjust is going to be the most important thing. And I think he showed that this week. He saw, you know what? My game plan against Tampa Bay was just simply not correct, and I'm gonna fix it. And we saw against Texans it worked. They kicked 2 field goals inside the 20-yard line, you know, coming off the Adrian Amos sack, and then I think they had another sack in the red zone that led to a field goal. And you know what? Look, we're into week 8. If it took 8 weeks for, you know, Pettin to truly figure out his personnel, okay, we're 5-1. I think we'll manage and be okay with it. But yeah, I've been pretty critical of Pettin, but after Sunday, I'll admit that I'm feeling a lot more optimistic.
Yep.
Yeah, we both have been very critical of him.
Yeah.
Very critical.
Yeah.
I was on here last week holding my forehead, you know, just like wondering what the hell he was, you know, some of the stuff he was doing against the Buccaneers, or some of the stuff he was calling. But of course, it takes cohesion between the players and the coaches for everything to work on the field. And the plan against Texans, it shut us up, because yeah, it's true. They got Will Fuller, they got Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks, Kenny Stills. They do have a lot of firepower, and Deshaun Watson, he's a threat within, you know, in himself. What he could do as a thrower, what he could do as a runner, he's lethal. And the Packers held them to just 20 points, you know, and a lot of that was, you know, that 30. What was it?
No, just like garbage time. That last touchdown.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that was garbage time. You know, that score wasn't as close as the game really indicated. You know, they were up 21-0. What was that, Matt?
Same with the first Vikings game. They scored 24 points in the 4th quarter when it wasn't even close.
Exactly.
Yeah, that 43-34 final score, that was not.
Yeah, the Packers dominated, you know, 75% of that game, and the 4th quarter said, you know, go ahead, take all the time you want, but you're not going to catch up to us. So I agree with you that it is impressive that they held the Texans and Falcons to the points they did, because those were 2 offenses I was truly nervous about. And seeing that they can handle them, it definitely gives me confidence moving forward. But we've definitely hit our time here on Open Book. So before we head out, everyone make sure to give Matt Schneidman a follow on Twitter at Matt Schneidman. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. Seriously, it was amazing to have you and get all your insight on the Packers. And you can find Zach on Twitter at @ItZachariahJ. And you can find me at bookofeli_NFL. And of course, Game On Wisconsin at GameOnWI. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And again, Matt, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.